Good morning. I am Chief Pamela A. Smith, Chief of Police of the Metropolitan Police Department here in Washington, D.C. And I'm joined today by members of the district's public safety team, as well as the counterparts from the United States Secret Service, the FBI, United States Capitol Police, the D.C. National Guard, and the Department of Defense. We're here today to discuss the security preparations for the upcoming counting and certification of the electoral votes during a joint session of Congress on January 6th and the upcoming state funeral for former President Jimmy Carter. Before we get into the details of the conference, please allow me to speak very briefly on the recent events that occurred across the country earlier this week. Since the incidents, we have begun actively working with our local, federal, and state partners to share intelligence and to provide support for the ongoing investigation. As of this moment, there are no credible known threats here in the District of Columbia, but out of an abundance of caution, I have heightened our security postures across the city in light of the recent events. Members of the community will notice an increased presence of police officers throughout the district. I want to assure our community that whenever a significant event occurs, such as what happened on New Year's Day, we closely monitor the incident and immediately began engaging with intelligence communities, and we take an additional step to reevaluate our security posture to ensure the safety of our residents, businesses, as well as our visitors. And now looking ahead to Monday, January 6th, the counting and certification of the electoral votes at the United States Capitol has been designated as a national special security event that is led by the United States Secret Service. This event brings together coordination and participation from all levels of government, as well as from our local, state, and federal public safety partners. To our residents and businesses, most of the impact of this event will be felt around the U.S. Capitol on Monday. This will also include road closures, which Capitol Police will provide more details shortly during this conference. And following the proceedings at the U.S. Capitol on Monday, January 6th, the state funeral events to honor former President Carter will be held here in Washington, D.C. between Tuesday, January 7th and Thursday, January 9th. President Carter's state funeral also has been designated as an NSSE, and the United States Secret Service is the lead law enforcement agency for this event. The public will have an opportunity to pay their final respects during a ceremony at the Naval Memorial and a procession to the U.S. Capitol on Tuesday, which will be followed by the former president lying in state in the Capitol Rotunda on Tuesday evening and Wednesday. And on Thursday, former President Carter's funeral service will be held at the Washington National Cathedral. At this time, I'm going to turn it over to Special Agent in Charge, Matt McCool, from the U.S. Secret Service Washington Field Office to discuss the security plans for U.S. Secret Service.
Good morning. I want to thank Chief Pamela Smith of the Metropolitan Police Department, Chief Tom Manger in the Capitol Police, Assistant Director in Charge David Sundberg of the FBI's Washington Field Office, and all of our partners you see up here today. The partnerships within the National Capital Region have never been stronger. Ensuring public safety during high-profile events is truly a team effort. My name is Matt McCool. I am the Special Agent in Charge of the Secret Service's Washington Field Office. We are here today to discuss the public safety plans for the 2025 counting and certification of electoral votes and the state funeral of former President Carter. It was an honor and a privilege to serve President Carter, and the Secret Service joins the nation in mourning his passing. For just over 48 years, our agency stood watch over the late president, who was the longest-standing protectee in the agency's history. In my previous position, I was responsible for the advanced security planning for several of President Carter's peacekeeping missions to the Middle East. Serving the 39th president in this capacity remains among the highlights of my career. In a final act of service, President Carter's detail agents will serve as pallbearers, as they did for former First Lady Rosalind Carter. The Department of Homeland Security has pre-designated state funerals in Washington, D.C. as national special security events. This designation allows the federal government, along with our state and local partners, to use significant resources to implement a comprehensive security plan. The Secret Service authors this security plan and coordinates assets with many of the public safety partners you see here today, and others using a whole-of-government approach. State funerals require notable coordination with our Department of Defense counterparts. Since our agency was authorized to provide these type of security plannings in May of 1998, there have been 80 NSSEs. Over half of those NSSCs have been in the NCR. So the Washington, D.C. area is well-versed in these high-profile events. Still, back-to-back NSSCs are a unique situation. The Secret Service will bring in agents and other specialists from field offices across the country to supplement our staffing. A multitude of seen and unseen security measures will operate in tandem to ensure a comprehensive and seamless security plan comes to fruition. The 2025 counting and certification of electoral votes starts this busy period on Monday, January 6th. This is the first time the NSSC designation has been granted for an election certification. Chief Manger will provide the bulk of the details around securing this event, which will look and feel like a State of the Union address for those who live and work in Washington, D.C. President Carter's funeral ceremony will immediately follow after 3 days of events in Georgia. The late president will arrive at Joint Base Andrews in the afternoon of Tuesday, January 7th. The funeral procession will travel to the Naval Memorial and then to the U.S. Capitol. Chief Smith will offer details on traffic implication and other regional impacts. Meanwhile, I advise everyone that the Secret Service will use drones as part of our comprehensive security plan. Do not be alarmed if you see these assets during the upcoming events or training in the days ahead. President Carter will lay in state in the Capitol on Wednesday, January 8th, and members of Congress and the public will be able to pay their respects. The ceremony will move to the Washington National Cathedral on the morning of Thursday, January 9th for a funeral service before departing that afternoon to Georgia for final internment. As with all NSSCs, the Secret Service will work closely with our partners to keep everyone safe next week. We further aim to minimize disruptions for those living, working, and visiting the NCR to the greatest extent possible. We will provide further details about the upcoming inauguration at a later date. The Secret Service truly appreciates your patience and understanding during this eventful time. Our agents and our partners are working diligently to keep everyone safe. And now it's my pleasure to introduce Chief Manger of the United States Capitol Police. Thank you.
Thank you, Matt. Chief Tom Manger, United States Capitol Police. As our nation struggles to maintain a sense of safety in light of the recent mass killings and acts of terrorism, the eyes of the world will be on the United States Capitol to see what happens here on January 6th. We're living in a time of heightened threat environment toward government and elected officials. Our nation's Capitol is prepared to ensure that the legislative process will proceed without disruption and our government will have a peaceful transfer of power. The United States Capitol Police are better staffed, better trained, better equipped than ever before to protect our Capitol and to protect our Congress. 4 years ago, the Office of the Inspector General issued over a dozen after-action reports containing 103 recommendations. We have completed every single one of those recommendations. Today, our planning, our preparation, our intelligence, our training, our equipment are all exactly where they need to be. And as indicated by all of the people here, this has been and continues to be a team effort. Dozens of public safety agencies will be in Washington, D.C. over the next few days to help us keep our community and the government safe. The cooperation among the allied law enforcement agencies in this region is as good as it gets anywhere in this country. Now I'll turn it over to Assistant Director in Charge, Dave Sundberg of the FBI.
Thank you, Chief Manger. Good morning. I'm Dave Sundberg, Assistant Director in Charge of the FBI's Washington Field Office. I appreciate the opportunity to be here today to discuss the FBI's partnerships with federal and local agencies to prepare for the upcoming national special security events here in the District of Columbia. For these events, the FBI has the lead federal law enforcement responsibility for crisis management, response to terrorist threats, and intelligence. Leading up to and during these events, FBI intelligence analysts have been and will continue to assess and share event-related intelligence with all of our partners. At this time, we are not tracking any credible or specific threats associated with these events. That being said, we are certainly operating in a heightened threat environment, especially given the incidents in both New Orleans and in Las Vegas on January 1st. At this time, we have no information indicating a local threat associated with either of those incidents. We will continue to work closely with our partners to share information and identify and disrupt any threats that may emerge. As always, we remind the public to remain vigilant and to report any suspicious activity to law enforcement. We look forward to working with our partners to ensure that these events are held both safely and securely. Thank you.
Before we get into questions, certainly want to thank Assistant Director in Charge Sundberg and the rest of my partners here who have explained kind of sort of what the posture will be here in the District of Columbia. What I do know is that events like these require detailed planning, close collaboration, and constant communication with our law enforcement partners. And I want to thank each of our partners who are standing here, my colleagues today, for their continued partnership of the Metropolitan Police Department. And as we've stated, beginning Sunday morning, the Metropolitan Police Department will go into full activation. This activation positions additional officers with specialized training that can be deployed anywhere in the district at a moment's notice, while ensuring that our ability to respond to routine calls for police service will continue across our city. We are committed to upholding the right to peacefully assemble and protest here in our city. However, as I've stated before, when we have special events, and I want to be very clear that we will not tolerate any violence, rioting, destruction of property, or any behavior that threatens the safety and security of our city. This message extends to anyone traveling to the district over the next 3 weeks. We welcome visitors to come and experience what this incredible city has to offer, but those who are intentional on unlawful activity should know that there will be consequences. With all of the events scheduled for next week, there will be road closures around the U.S. Capitol, the Navy Memorial, and the National Cathedral. We are asking our community to be patient, plan ahead, and give yourself extra time. We also encourage you to consider utilizing our Metro Transit system. We have a full list of road closures, maps, and additional information regarding the security of these events online at nsse.dc.gov. It is available for you to view at this moment. Thank you all for being here today. We will open up the floor for any questions.
Hi, Chief. Michelle Marsh from 7 News. I first want to thank you all for the hard work that you're doing. You mentioned New Orleans, and that is a case of a single person who was self-radicalized, someone who did their own planning. Can you tell us, how do you prepare for someone who is hell-bent on carnage?
Well, I think what we all do as law enforcement partners, I think every single day, and I think I shared earlier, if not weekly, on a biweekly basis, we are always talking about incident that could potentially happen here in the city. And what we do, and what I do know, is that we're all very well-trained professionals in this space, and we also host a lot of intentional special events across the city year in and year out. And I'm very confident in the team that I have standing alongside me. Whenever we have any events, we know how to come together and solve those issues. Yes, sir.
The interesting confluence of 2 back-to-back special security events,
3.
but it's really 3, right?
That's
with
right.
The inauguration rolling right into this.
That is correct.
Can you speak to sort of is there any historical precedent for this many in this short of a time, and what does that do to, resources, personnel, the level of coordination that's needed?
Well, you already know what it does to resources and personnel whenever we have these significant events. If you think back to what occurred in July 4th, we had the NATO summit, and then we had the Prime Minister of Israel who visited our city. And clearly the same team that you see standing here today, we all came together, we met, we had our rock drills or rehearsal of a concept drills to ensure that we are all working very collaboratively in this space. When you talk about the number of personnel or resources that we have available specifically at the Metropolitan Police Department, we leverage that with the technology. As you heard, Special Agent McCool talked about drones and different apparatus that we will continue to use in order to have eyes and ears across our city. In these 3 particular events, we will continue to do the same in that space.
Have you had 3 national special security events in 1 month before? It has happened, or?
Well, I will turn that over to Special Agent McCool, Secret Service, and he may be able to address that for you.
No, that has never happened before. We have 3 NSSCs over a 15-day period. But what I will tell you is we're flexible, we're adaptable. We've been working on these events for, in some cases, years and then months, definitely over several months for all of them. So we're going to be prepared. The team is flexible, and so we're going to get it done.
Beatrice Peterson, ABC News. Speaking of personnel, you had asked for 4,000 additional officers from across the country. I was wondering, I know you hit that goal. Given that there's so much events that's happening in the district, are you adding to that goal and maybe asking for additional officers? And in addition to that, National Guard, has that been approved and gone through?
So let me answer your first question. You always ask two questions every time I'm up here. So the first question is that we are close to the 4,000 additional resources that we've asked for across the United States, and we're very happy for that. And we also thank those law enforcement agencies who have actually been reaching out to ask us if they could provide assistance. And so we're certainly happy for that. When it comes to the number of resources that we have, we're not asking for any additional. We've been planning for this inauguration since 4 years prior, and we're at that point right now. And again, we will be prepared, we'll be flexible, and we will be adaptable to anything that may occur in our city. You forgot about the National Guard. Hold. Yes.
Thank you. Very proud to be with you this morning to talk about the National Guard and the support that we're giving to our federal and district law enforcement partners. We do have approved requests for assistance to support the certification. We will have 500 soldiers on standby for that mission. We also have approved requests for the state funeral coming up. We'll have liaison officers, escort officers for the governors for that particular event. And we're currently pending approval for the third NSSC, the presidential inauguration. The current number right now is 7,800 soldiers and airmen that we'll be bringing in.
4 years ago, they did a lot of traffic. Is that the plan to pretty much oversee traffic management?
Yeah, all of our, with respect to the presidential inauguration, that is true. We will be providing outer and inner perimeter security support to both Capitol Police, MPD, and Secret Service as well. So.
Sir, can you say the number? You give a number for the inauguration?
Yeah, currently pending, the number is 7,800 is the current request.
Thank you.
Mm-hmm. Oh, yes, I'm sorry. Major General John Andoni. I'm the commanding general for the D.C. National Guard. Yes, sir.
Brad Bell with Channel 7. So I don't know who wants to take this one, perhaps Chief Manger. Look, obviously the political dynamic is different this time than it was 4 years ago for January 6th. But do you see any possibility that there could be any sort of disruption like we saw back then? Is there any intelligence that anybody's coming to town? Do you have any expectation? Could it happen again? That's 5 questions.
5 questions. There's no credible intelligence that we expect a mass demonstration like we had 4 years ago. Anytime you ask a question about, what intelligence and what we are reacting to from the intelligence community, it always ends with, but there's always the lone wolf, always the person who's operating by themselves, and you have no warning about those individuals. That's what occurred in this past few days. These were folks that were by themselves. There was no way for anybody to know about what they were planning. So we need to be prepared for that as much as we need to be prepared for anything. There are several permitted demonstrations. There's some chatter about some other folks and conspiracy theorists, talking about, well, if this happens, we need to be at the Capitol, those kinds of things. But again, no indication that hotels are filling up with these people, that these people are traveling to D.C. But there's the threat environment is heightened at a level that all of us are on high alert. All of us are being very proactive in terms of the preventive measures that we're putting into place.
You also have a hard perimeter.
We do, which again, that's part of the layered security that we have for the Capitol.
Chief, while you're up there, two quick questions. How long will the fencing stay up around the Capitol? Will that stay up through past January 20, or when do you expect that?
It'll stay up through the inauguration.
And then for the visitation, the viewing for President Carter and the weather that might be impacting that. Can you just tell people what they might expect if there would be long lines that stretch out into the street and outside of the Capitol, how you'll be preparing for weather for that?
So typically there are long lines for the state funerals. Folks do queue up outside, and they should expect to be able to deal with the elements. And if anybody here can answer about how to, restore order when this city gets 5 to 8 inches of snow, then I'd like to hear the answer to that.
I got a question. So yesterday we saw a guy who made a mistake about where to park, right? He's probably used to driving right up to the gear that he's working on, and he was in handcuffs for quite some time, and he's facing a charge. What do you say to those who are going to come to town and maybe disobey an order? You've got multiple messages. You're asking people to be vigilant. What are messages should be sent out there?
Well, the first message is don't drive on the sidewalk, and don't park on the grass on Capitol grounds unless you're given permission to do that. I mean, we need to be vigilant, and when our officers were less than a minute in observing this individual driving on the sidewalk and having him in handcuffs. We had no idea what all that was about. There were people on the sidewalk, and so those are the kinds of things that all of us are on alert for. And so people can expect a quick reaction from law enforcement if they're engaging in concerning behavior.
Good morning. Thanks for taking our questions. I'm Randy Bass with DC News Now. Over the last 24 to 48 hours, we've learned the president-elect is planning to have a large rally at Capital One Arena the Sunday before the election. Is the safety and security plans in place for that? Is that connected to the inauguration? Is that part of the overall safety and security plan, or are there additional or separate plans being made for that particular event?
It's part of the same operational period that we have that's designated for the inauguration. As you know, there will be balls. There will be various events taking place throughout the city during the week of the inauguration. And again, we are prepared to address any large crowds or concerns with respect to that event.
Thank you. Thank you for taking questions. Can anybody up there talk about the Secret Service in terms of staffing? Some have called it a, quote, agency in decline regarding staffing levels and staffing shortages.
I think the Secret Service might be able to address that.
With respect to the Washington field office, we have the most staffing that we've had in 3 years. Not concerned at all. We have with the staffing that we need to fulfill our mission for the 3 NSSEs. Does that answer your question? Okay. Yep.
When we talk about threat assessments and we're talking about lone wolf, is the FBI concerned about copycats? I mean, arguably Jabbar was a copycat from the German market just a few weeks ago. So are we still concerned about potential copycats from that incident?
I think we're always concerned about any behavior that may drive other violent behavior, and we've certainly seen that in past these 2 events. The FBI will continue to look for any intelligence that might let us discover a plan to commit a violent act, whether it's individually or as a large group, and we will ensure that we assess and move that information to our partners as quickly as possible. The security procedures you see around a national special security event certainly give us an enhanced ability to interdict something like that. They are challenging cases to work, but we've been working with them for a very long time. In New Orleans and Las Vegas, both cases being investigated by FBI field offices there alongside their state and local partners and any other federal agencies that would get involved in those areas of responsibility, much like we do here in Washington, D.C.
A question for Chief Manger. I'm curious how your officers are feeling going into this January 6th. This is the first one since in terms of presidential elections. How is morale? How are your officers feeling going into this, knowing about all of the past trauma from just 4 years ago?
So probably the biggest goal that my management team has had over the past 4 years is restore the confidence in our officers that we are prepared for anything. And we've spent the last 4 years increasing staffing, increasing training, getting new equipment, and standing up what I believe is a world-class intelligence operation, and probably most of all, just overturned our planning process into what it should be. So when we plan for an event, everything that goes into it. And I think that, look, any chief that will stand up here and talk about the morale of his troops, morale's in the eye of the beholder. I'm the last person you should ask about morale, because I could give you a long dissertation on morale. The fact of the matter is, you ask these officers, do you have confidence today? And I was at a roll call at 7 o'clock this morning, and was talking to the officers, and I asked for a show of hands. How of you were here 4 years ago? And about half of them raised their hand. The other half came here knowing exactly what they were getting into, and they're here because they want to be. And if you ask most of them, they were here because of January 6th. That's why they wanted to come to the Capitol Police. And the other folks were in that roll call were the first responders, the bicycle officers, and the civil disturbance officers. These are officers that want to be on the front lines of what is happening here. So I do think that officers are confident that we're prepared for anything, and I believe that we have restored that sense of safety for our community on Capitol Hill, and restored the confidence of the officers that the department's not going to let them down.
Hi, Ellie Silverman with the Washington Post. Thanks for taking our questions. I know that you all have talked about how, in light of recent attacks, you're all on high alert, but I'm wondering if you or others could speak more specifically about any changes that maybe those events have already prompted. For example, are you expanding the security perimeter, more so than you would have or planned to a week ago? Or are there additional road closures, just anything more specific that these events have prompted in your posture?
I think, as I've stated earlier, is that one of the things that we oftentimes do is that we work very closely with our intelligence community and our partners and my colleagues here. And anytime we see any threats across the country that may be impactful here, we reassess and reevaluate our security posture. And as you know, we've been working and planning the inauguration for quite some time. And if we feel or believe at this time that there is a need for us to enhance our security posture any higher than, or heighten it any higher than what it is, we will do so. At this time, we do not see, or we do not know of any known credible threats to the city. We will manage the plan that we have created amongst all of our agencies. And as you know, we're very flexible. In this space here in the District of Columbia, we have managed large-scale events on many, many occasions, and we will be agile in that if there's a need for us to increase our posture, which is why we're going to a full activation, we will have those resources readily available for us to do so.
That was released on the unsolved pipe bomb case. I was just wondering if you could speak to or describe your level of concern that that person is still on the loose, still at large.
We're absolutely concerned that person is still on the loose and at large. Those were two viable devices left not only outside of the Democratic and Republican National Committee headquarters, but in a neighborhood where people work and live. We have had a consistent effort alongside our partners to try to identify that person. That is going to remain a threat until we can identify that person. Unidentified, we don't know motive or intent from about 4 years ago, so I can't tell you with specificity any relationship to the County Electoral College votes on January 6th, but we remain concerned and vigilant.